Hello, everyone. This is Clay Chase with Torrey Hills Capital. I'd like to welcome you all to the Eupraxia Pharmaceuticals Zoom presentation for August 12th, 2025. I trust and hope you're all well, having a great summer. And as we're kind of winding down here, it's already, gosh, almost middle of August right now. School started here. I don't know about you guys, but school started here yesterday. So all the kids are back in school. So now, as many of you know, we're always on the lookout for companies that, flying under the radar. They're underfollowed, they're underappreciated. The market just doesn't get them or hasn't figured them out yet or hasn't seen them yet. So that's why I'm really excited that you're going to be able to see this presentation today. This is a client that we feel has that really special market disconnect, that kind of quality, and could be very well positioned for some extremely above average enterprise value growth over the next couple quarters. In fact, if you were on the call earlier, they have a kind of a real big watershed event coming up here in the next month or two, something like that. So if they're successful in executing their development plan, we think it's going to be a really special company, and we're going to learn a lot about that today during the presentation. Now, as always, if you have a question during the presentation, just feel free to ask. You can click on the Q&A icon. You can type into the chat box, or you can raise your hand and we can actually turn on your microphone and you can ask the question directly on the program. Our feature company today, as I mentioned, is Eupraxia, Eupraxia Pharmaceuticals. Eupraxia Pharmaceuticals, they're a clinical stage biotechnology company that's bringing through the clinic a very novel and proprietary time-released drug delivery technology or platform. They call it DiffuSphere. It's amazing when you see what this does. It addresses a significant unmet medical need for safe and long-lasting symptom relief in a number of medical indications. Companies currently evaluating the efficacy of DiffuSphere for the treatment of, it's called EOE, eosinophilic esophagitis. I hope I said that correctly. And also OA, knee osteoarthritis, which many of you know a lot about, maybe too much. I do. I know in addition to these two high value markets, Eupraxia believes that DiffuSphere could also be highly effective in the time-release drug delivery for post-operative pain, as well as the effective drug delivery platform for a myriad of cancer therapies. We're talking a lot of these drugs that make you really sick, but if you could get them just where they're supposed to go and not wherever else, they work better and they don't make the patient so sick. So it improves the safety profile and outcomes over the current standard of care, which is usually can bring a lot of value to people who are in these early. Eupraxia trades on the Nasdaq, ticker is EPRX. Currently, it's around $5.32 a share. Market cap's around $190 million. With us today to discuss Eupraxia is the company's chief executive officer, Dr. James Helliwell. Hi, Dr. Helliwell. How are you today?
Clay, I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for hosting this, and thank you for everybody for attending.
You bet. Well, it's kind of a long-winded introduction. We'll get on to the main event here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now,
Great.
which is going to allow you to put up your presentation, I believe,
Perfect.
and we'll get right into it.
Outstanding. Well,
There it is.
there
Well,
it is.
fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yep,
Great.
you're on.
Well, thank you so much, Clay, for hosting this, and to Torrey Hills for really being so great, and for those of you who are joining for being here, for listening today, and hope that we can really tell you a lot about what it is we're doing and some of the really important milestones and catalysts that we have that are coming in the really near term. So these were actually up during Clay's intro, so I will leave them there for just a moment and tell you a little bit about where this idea comes from. So, by background, I'm a physician. I'm a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist, and I spent my clinical time doing heart transplants. So, as you can imagine, when you're doing heart transplants and you're dealing with those very, very sick cardiac patients, you're really balancing everything on a knife edge, which means that your drug delivery has to be very precise. So precision matters. That means that you have to get the right drug to the right tissues in the right dose. You can't be over, you can't be under, and you don't want to be in the wrong place with your drug. When we actually think about how we deliver drugs today, probably all of us take some drug. It might be for blood pressure, for cholesterol, for something else. You might take it once a day, twice a day. You might take a once a week injection. If you do that, what's happening is you're always getting this peak of drug at the beginning, and then it drops off very quickly. It's also going everywhere in your body. So not just to the place that needs treatment, but to every other cell. The diffusphere technology is designed to counteract that. So these little particles are about the size of a grain of sand. And so they're 100 microns in size, and that's very specific. And they stay that size. The reason we designed them to stay that size is that if you break apart and get smaller, which is what most of things that are injected that are small like this, is they break apart into even smaller pieces and they travel everywhere in the body. And so that means that they are no longer just where you put them. Ours are designed to stay in the tissue where you put them and release at a constant rate over a long period of time. And so what we'll do as we go through, we'll actually show you the clinical data that's coming from our programs so that you can really see how this is really working in lots and lots of humans. So we'll use as our example eosinophilic esophagitis. So it's a bit of a mouthful of a disease, so we call it EOE for short. So what is it? You may not have heard of it. Ironically, it's estimated that it will be by next year about the same prevalence as Crohn's disease, which all of us have heard about. So where is this stealthy disease coming from? Well, when I went through medical school, this really wasn't a disease. We weren't taught about it. We didn't think about it when we saw patients. What do these patients look like? These are people who are often misdiagnosed for years. The symptoms that you have are difficulty swallowing when you eat or pain on swallowing. And a lot of people get misdiagnosed as reflux disease. And so they get put on medicines for that that can have some help at the early stages of this disease. But this is a progressive disease. So it's lots of inflammation. That inflammation continues and continues and creates fibrosis or scar tissue. You essentially take your esophagus, which is this distensible tube, and you turn it into a rigid lead pipe. That then means that food is difficult to go down, painful to go down, but the worst is when it gets stuck. We call that a food impaction. You're taken to the emergency room, and the only way to take it out is for people to actually go down with a scope and pull it out. And so this ends up becoming a very, very severe disease. There aren't a lot of treatments, and we'll talk a little bit about them as we go along here. But really, the goals of treatment are to reduce the symptoms, but also to improve the tissue health. In other words, you want to reverse that fibrosis and you want to stop that inflammation and scar tissue production. And you also want to get rid of eosinophils, which are part of this inflammatory process, but very much not all of it. So as we look at this, it's really interesting to see this disease. So in 2020, this was considered an orphan disease. There were no drugs approved for its treatment. All the drugs that were used were off-label, and they were primarily steroids. And so steroids such as the one we're using within our diffusphere called fluticasone. You may know fluticasone as Flovent or Advair. So very commonly taken as an inhaled agent for the lungs, because asthma actually has quite a lot of similarities to EOE in terms of its inflammatory process. And so just like fluticasone is tissue modifying in asthma, we expect it will have the same thing, and we hope to see the same thing from our data in these patients with EOE. By 2024, there were over 500,000 patients, and they're estimating by 2026 that'll be closer to 1 million patients. In other words, we're just at the tip of the iceberg. That means a few things. That means there's a lot of patients for us to make better. Number two, that means that this is a really, really big market that is really underserved. Now, these patients require at a minimum to go into their gastroenterologist and to get an endoscopy. So that's you go down with the camera, just how they make the diagnosis, and then to be able to take biopsies, but they deliver no treatment that way. So, and we'll come back to that because that's really important. The only drug today that in North America is approved for, in the United States, that's approved for continuous use is a drug called Dupixent. Now, you probably will have seen TV ads for that. in asthma or atopic dermatitis, where it's used very effectively as a once every 2 weeks injection. Well, when they tried it in EOE, it didn't work once every 2 weeks. So they had to double the dose and give it once every week. Now, it's a systemic injection that you give to yourself. And what they found in the data is that 39% of patients achieve clinical remission, meaning that they feel symptomatically better in a clinically meaningful way. And its cost is $100,000 a year. So this is a pretty heavy patient burden, both in terms of the weekly injection, as well as the fact that it's $100,000 a year. And so our goal is to really be able to do much better than that for patients. Why do we think we can do better? Well, this is a really confusing slide, and it is not something that I really want you to dig into, other than to recognize there's a lot of stuff going on here. The treatments, including Dupixent, which is treating that little green cell down at the bottom there, that's basically what it's doing, is it's treating that sort of area of this complex inflammatory process, but only there. Other treatments are targeting just one small piece of this. At the far left, you'll see corticosteroids listed. They hit all of this. In other words, they're actually really blocking almost all of these pieces. So you'll see things here like IL-4, IL-13, eosinophils, mast cells, TSLP. Well, fluticasone targets all of those things. The trick is to actually get it into this tissue and get it there properly. And that's exactly what we do with the DiffuSphere, is have the ability to get it there and keep it there. So the Resolve trial is the trial that is currently ongoing, and it's in two parts. And it's designed to really, in part A, look at what is the right dose that we need to use. And so as you can see here from the diagram on the right-hand side, we give quite a few injections actually into the esophagus. And don't worry, it's done during your endoscopy. It only takes a few minutes and you cannot feel the injections. There's no nerve endings there to be able to feel that. So it's a very quick and easy process these physicians are used to doing with other drugs, things like Botox for esophageal spasm. So as you can see, we started really small at 1 milligram per injection site, and then going all the way up to 8 milligrams per injection site. The things we're looking at in the part A are primarily safety, but we're also looking at efficacy. So that's again how patients feel, the tissue health, and the eosinophil count. Now, this trial is essentially fully recruited now. There's a few additional patients that are going in to round out the numbers, but we have now just launched just a few weeks ago our phase 2b confirmation study. Already the recruitment is going very, very well in this trial and beyond our expectations. This is a placebo-controlled trial. So there's 2 active patients to every 1 placebo. And so this is going to be really that sort of a very, very big trial that's going to tell us at numbers really what's happening and allow us to head into a phase 3 trial.
Mr. Helliwell?
I beg your pardon. Question.
Sorry to break in, but I have a
Yeah.
question, and it's timely, and so I don't want to get too far into the
Mhm.
presentation before we ask. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, was EOE just misdiagnosed in the past? Did the disease they thought it was go down proportionally, or is it more of a new phenomenon? If so, why do you think, or why does the community think that it's
Yeah.
newer? Why is the population growing? I guess let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a great question, Clay. So the answer is a lot of it is misdiagnosis. So of the growth that you see, probably 70% of that growth year on year is us finding patients who were not properly diagnosed. So in other words, they might have been told they had reflux or something like that. There's a really good New York Times article that people can go and search, and it's called The Mystery of My Burning Esophagus. And it's a piece written by someone who spent 10 years bouncing from doctor to doctor to doctor before someone finally diagnosed them with EOE. Now, of course, now they are looking for an optimal treatment for it, but at least they have a diagnosis. The second part of the growth is that there is something environmental happening.
Right.
So just as we are seeing people with more allergic responses in
Hmm.
various other ways, we're seeing something in the environment is clearly triggering
Food. Yeah.
this response, this highly responsive inflammatory esophagus. Is it food product related? Is it things like, dishwasher detergents. We don't know.
Environmental,
And
yeah.
I think that there's a bit of a mystery there. But the largest part is the diagnosis of people who've been suffering without a proper diagnosis.
There's no if you don't have if the doctors don't have something that they can prescribe or help you with, sometimes they're not as interested in finding out what really is the root cause of why you're having these problems, right?
Well, yeah, and so certainly, if you've got, it's how much do you put a patient through, sort of diagnostic trials, when you have no treatment for them. So first, it was oral steroids being used off label. Dupixent, they're still essentially kind of that first line once you've made the diagnosis for the most part. Proton pump inhibitors are also used fairly often very early. And then Dupixent is really for those patients who've failed everything else, and you really don't have anything else to do for them. To give you some sense of where Dupixent is, so again, if we say today there are only 500,000 patients, they reported in their annual report about 30,000 prescriptions for Dupixent in 2024, generating about $2.1 billion. So
Yeah.
very large market.
Yeah.
Considering that they only captured, a very small percentage of the market.
Mhm.
So there's a very large opportunity here.
Right.
Oh, were you asking something there, Clay? You went on mute. Oh, okay. So let's talk a little bit about data. So what we've been doing is giving sort of these increased injections, and you can see here that you've got sort of at the bottom, these sort of various cohorts that are coming in here. That red line that you see at the top, we talked about the fact that there are millions of patients who are taking fluticasone inhaled on a daily basis. Well, that red line is the level that they have in their blood twice a day, every time they take this, which they take essentially for their lifetime. And so, really, from the regulatory agencies, it's you need to have a level that's below that, and we're not concerned about your safety from a systemic perspective. As you can see, we have a little bit of equilibration at the beginning for a couple of days, but within 2 weeks, our levels get in there and it just settles to flat. Remember, this is from a single set of injections at day 0, and you're seeing data out here to 9 months. So this is 9 months from a single injection, really low levels, so very safe levels, but very constant levels. So you're not getting that delivery that all the other drugs are giving you, which is big peaks and big deep troughs. So how does that translate into how patients are doing? So let's now look here, and where we have the most data so far is at the 2.5 and the 4 milligram per site. And so what you'll see here is that it takes a little while. It takes around 12 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks for the drug to really start to settle in. And then once it's done that, patients are feeling really good, and they're feeling good for a long time. And that feeling good is defined as at the low end, clinical response and clinical remission at the high end. And you'll recall that we talked about Dupixent, only 39% of patients achieve clinical remission. Well, we're doing better than that. So not everybody gets into clinical remission, but our goal is to do better than 39% and to do so quite a lot. And we'll talk about a little bit of that numbers as we go here. One of the things that's really important here is you can see that we are putting people into remission and holding them there for 9 months. So just like you saw with the drug levels, that's exactly what we're seeing in terms of the durability of that response. Why does that matter? Well, we've done extensive work with patients, doctors, and payers. And what they have told us is that if we're doing as well as Dupixent in terms of clinical outcome, and we're lasting between 9 months and a year, we will essentially go ahead of everybody in the treatment algorithm. What that means is that market won't be small at the end, but very large at the beginning. And that's really important. And you can imagine if you're a patient and you're either taking oral medications twice a day or an injection once a week, to be told that while you're going for your annual endoscopy, which you go for anyway, the insurance company's paying for anyway, that your drugs will be delivered while you're asleep and you don't need to take anything for an entire year. you want to sign up for that. And so, as we talked a little bit about earlier, we have some really critical data on durability, that 1 year time point. That's coming in the kind of September, October timeframe. It's going to depend a little bit on when those patients all come in for their visits. And that's really important because that durability piece is one of the most critical aspects of this product. And you can see at 9 months, everybody is still where they were at 6 months. And so that's really, really sort of powerful data and a lot more to come that we think will be really meaningful when we announce it.
Dr. Helliwell, this is one of the lower doses, right? This is the 4 milligram, right? The red
So
line.
this is the 4 milligrams per
So
site.
you've doubled that in your clinical, you're currently running phase 2B trial, is it?
That's right. So we have the 2B trial, and in that we've got the 6 milligrams per site that is launched in that. You can see a little bit of 6 milligrams per site data at the beginning here,
Yeah, at the very
out to,
start. Yeah.
out to 4 weeks. And we also have some 8 milligram per injection site patients that are going to be coming. So there's a lot of data coming in the
Right.
September, October timeframe, both on durability, which is sort of that most important aspect, and then second is also on the dosing. What
Right.
we're
Yes. I
Yeah,
remember now it's a cohort 8, not 8 milligrams. That's where I got confused there.
yeah, absolutely. And so this is still asking patients how they feel. And so we know that um, we always know this sort of placebo effect that we understand. So there can be a little bit of that in this data. Our next pieces of data have zero placebo effect. These are biopsies. So these are biopsies taken during the endoscopy throughout the esophagus and then analyzed. And in our study, they're analyzed by a central reader. So we've got one specialist who's looking at all the biopsies from all over and looking at them again in this blinded fashion so that they can really see what's happening. So let's look first at tissue health. And what you can see is we've got the 2.5 milligrams, the 4, and the 6. And at week 4, what you can see is that as you give more drug, the tissue responds better. And so the other thing we see is over time, that response seems to continue to improve. In other words, the 4 milligrams looks much better at 12 than it did at 4, and it continues to improve all the way to 9 months. So we're getting 9 months of tissue improvement. Dr. Evan Dellin, who's the chair of our clinical advisory board, he is the leading physician in this disease. And he has come out publicly and stated that if this trend continues with this kind of response, he believes that this could be potentially disease modifying. And that's really, really important because what this is telling you is that we're not just getting rid of the inflammation, but we're actually reversing some of the effects of this disease so that we can avoid that distensible tube turning into a lead pipe.
And isn't Dr. Dillon on the board that recommends first line, second line treatment for this disease at
Yeah,
the
so
FDA?
so Dr. Dellin is one of the key authors of the treatment guidelines.
Guidelines, yeah.
And so the treatment guidelines, which there's both American and European, and he's really really involved very heavily in that. If you go and search up EOE in the New England Journal of Medicine, you'll find that he is the lead author or one of the key authors in virtually every EOE paper published. And so he really is, along with the rest of our clinical advisory board, just incredibly important in this disease.
Yeah, he was on a program with you about 4 months ago, I think, maybe 3 months ago. And he to say he's keen on this particular therapy is being an understatement, I think.
Yeah, and that both that presentation and the transcript for it are available on our website
Yep.
under events and presentations as well.
Yeah, it's a great
Um,
presentation.
and so if people do want to look and hear his voice on this, I'd highly encourage it. Um,
There's
this,
another go.
yeah,
Sorry, there's another question here, and I don't know if it's
yeah.
related. It's not really related, but it's a good question. Can this be used for Barrett's esophagus? I don't know what that is, but you
Yeah.
probably do.
So I'll explain that for people because it's a really brilliant question. So Barrett's esophagus is essentially what happens when you've had long-term reflux. So you've got lots of acid that's bathing the lower part of your esophagus. It creates inflammation, irritation, and then it scars up. And it can lead to cancer. And esophageal cancer is something that you really, really don't want. So absolutely, we have had as physicians have looked at the impact we're having here on the tissues and the inflammation and how localized this delivery is. We are not giving this everywhere in the body. This is just in the esophagus, and it's a treatment that's lasting what we can see here 9 months, and we anticipate 1 year. So absolutely, we believe that this has applicability in Barrett's. This also has come from the physicians as they look at this data. They said, we believe this could help in Crohn's disease, where there's some very difficult subtypes of Crohn's that are very hard to treat. And same with things called strictures, which are really tight narrowings of the esophagus and of the colon. So that question is really smart, and it's really an enthusiastic yes from us. The nice thing about that is it's the same doctors delivering the same drug in the same manner. So it's a very easy line expansion for us.
Yeah, you don't need to go out and like buy new equipment for the hospital. You don't need to train physicians to do something different that they've never done before.
That's
You
right.
know, doctors, they don't like change. That's
Yeah.
very
And,
much at
and
all.
and the great thing is what we're offering them here is an opportunity instead of writing a prescription with a whole bunch of paperwork for a very expensive drug, is the opportunity to do a procedure that they like and they're familiar with. They're also paid well for it. So you very much get the alignment of the physician with the alignment of the patient who just wants to take a drug once a year.
And the payer, right? Was if you compare it
Absolutely.
to Dupixent, it's like maybe going to be like something like one third or one fourth the cost.
Yeah, and so if you're saving money and providing equal or better treatment, the physicians are very happy. You find yourself in a very, very good place. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we're really starting to feel coming from our sites and also why our recruitment has been going so well in these trials. Um, in addition to that one histology measure on tissue health, we also have, excuse me, we have another that looks at peak eosinophil counts. Here, as you can see, it's that same trend. The more drug we give, the more we are reducing these eosinophils and really getting them under control. So all of that is really, really important. What does this actually sort of mean? How do we contextualize this? So we talked already about this Dupixent being a 39% clinical remission rate at 10 weeks in their phase 2 trial. Well, if you look at our data from this phase 2 trial, what we've just walked through, our clinical remission rate at week 12. So week 12, 55% of the patients in this trial are in clinical remission. Now that's across all the doses. When we look at 36 weeks, 9 months, 80% are in clinical remission. So in other words, not just doing as well, but actually doing better. We also are looking at sort of those patients who are getting both a clinical response, so not quite clinical remission, but a very good clinical response, and they are also having a response in their tissue, and that's 87%. When we compare that, Dupixent looked at a complete remission rate, which was both clinical remission, and they looked at a different measure, just eosinophil counts, and it was only 13%. So we're seeing a very sort of nice correlation between making the tissue better and making the patient better. And all of that is in context also of safety. So not only do we seem to be getting very strong efficacy with very strong durability, we're doing so in a convenient way that happens to also have a very strong safety profile. And that's all because of the how we deliver the drug. It is only in the tissues that we need, not the ones we don't, and we're not having big peaks and troughs. We now have 137 months of patient follow-up. So this is an incredibly long period of patient month follow-up. There have been no serious adverse events in this trial. One of the most common complications to those oral steroids that I was telling you people take is that they discontinue because they get fungal infections or candidiasis in their mouth, thrush. There's a study that was published early this year. And what that study looked at was compliance with the oral steroids in the United States. Well, only 34% of patients could actually tolerate it because of the side effects. So they discontinued. They couldn't take it twice a day. They couldn't take the side effects. Well, we've had not one case of GI candidiasis, so that infection, throughout this entire trial. And so very safe for cortisol, glucose, which are things you look at when you have steroids. So a really, really strong safety profile. As we look ahead, there's a whole lot of data coming. So we're going to be having in September, October, some very important data. Again, the most important piece that we're focused on in that is that 1 year time point. Are patients still doing well at 1 year? Now, we don't want them perfect. If everybody is perfect at 1 year, which would be asking a lot, they wouldn't be coming back for redosing, which means it would be a longer than 1 year product. So as you can see at 9 months, everybody was still in clinical remission. So there's no need to dose anybody at 9 months. So when we see that 1 year data, what we expect it will show is that some of the people will be returning to normal, and others will still be actually well treated. So what that means is that on average, people will be getting dosed around once a year, which probably is a bracket of kind of 11 to 13 months. Just like our annual dentist appointments when we go for checkups, it's not always on the same day in the same month every year, but it's around that 1 year time mark. Same thing what we're looking for here. That phase 2b trial, which is currently recruiting, we expect in the second half of 2026 to be releasing the top line of this data. That's going to be a really, really important time point as well. So again, catalysts all through the end of 25, early part of 26, leading then right into that very important unblinding from this placebo-controlled trial. We then will go meet, excuse me, with the FDA, have our end of phase 2 meeting, where we anticipate that we may be able to do a single registrational phase 3 trial, where we would follow between 150 and 300 patients, based on the phase 2b data, and then really follow them out for 52 weeks, and then be able to get on the market. So that's the development path that we have ahead, and really an incredible number of catalysts coming for the remainder of this year. A little bit about market data for you. So as of July 23rd, we were 513 shares outstanding. So this is 44.7 million. Built into there are actually some preferred shares that we have, about 9 million of those. So it's really sort of, I guess, 35 million shares outstanding, a little bit of preferred. Those preferred were for a financing round that we did in November of 2024. And that was led by an incredible group of investors, very friendly. They were, for the most part, already common share investors. We raised $45 million at that time. And that $45 million, the person who led that was the ex-head of private equity, who really established the private equity business for Brookfield Asset Management, which most of you will probably know, is sort of second to BlackRock in terms of their size, breadth, and expertise in that space. And so that person, Joe Friedman, has joined our board and brought an incredible amount of expertise to what we're doing here. And cash on hand as at the last quarter, end of last quarter, was 27.5 million. We will be having, I believe at close of market today, or before market opens tomorrow, a press release with the latest numbers. They will be on track. This gives us cash until Q3 of 2026. So there is no urgent need for us to be raising capital. And you shouldn't expect any changes to that guidance when you see the latest numbers come from the quarter later today or early tomorrow morning.
Yeah. sorry to break in, but
No,
that's
yeah.
one of the things that really stood out for us with Eupraxia. So, you see a lot of these companies in the biotech space, some of the other sectors. They have banks that work for them, and they get money, but it doesn't sometimes always look like it's real long term. These guys finance you. They get a lot of warrants. They sell the stock. They hold the warrant. Blah blah blah. So that's one thing that really I think is unique. Didn't I think when you were out in San Diego, you told me that their process when Brookfield got involved, that they hired an entire team to review this, right? And tell us a little bit about that due diligence process that you guys went through to get them to come in so long term and so big.
Yeah, and so you're absolutely right. I mean, our shareholder base is really long-term money. They're there because they understand several things. They understand the size of the EOE market and just what an opportunity there is there. That alone makes us, sort of a very interesting M&A target just on that asset. But more than that, they recognize the diffusphere technology, what it could do, and where we can go with that. As you mentioned at the very beginning of this in your introduction, cancer. So the ability, for example, to treat a cancer not by giving chemotherapy everywhere in the body, but just into the tumor. And so our ability to be able to do that, and our lab works very, very hard and has already got some fascinating products with very large markets where we could make a very big difference when our cost of capital comes to really where we believe that cost of capital should be. As again, we sort of believe that the valuation today isn't representative of where we will be in the relatively near term. As to why they came in so large, again, Joe Friedman, who really this is what he did, right? When you're head of private equity for Brookfield, you're used to taking a lot of diligence and doing sort of making long positions. And so their diligence was he hired his own team of everything from IP counsel to physicians, medical experts to come in and really do all their own diligence, which took months, and was really outstanding diligence being on the receiving end. They asked every important question, and then it was after that that they really came in and really built that $45 million round.
Right. And they have their own idea of kind of a target price. We won't talk about that because that's their business. But you have several research firms that have come in, also done due diligence, and they all have a target prices, I think between $11 and $12 for the 12-month prices. Like Craig Hallam, Cantor Fitzgerald, I think are the two that come to mind right away. And if,
Yeah,
if someone on the call wants one of those reports, let me know. I can get those out to you. But you had a comment on that, James? Sorry.
yeah. So I was just going to say, so you're right. So we have Craig Hallam, we have Canaccord who covers us,
Canaccord.
H.C. Wainwright. We also have Raymond James, and the most recent is Cantor Fitzgerald, as
Yeah.
you point
Right.
out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was gone just for a minute or two, but did you really cover the actual the engineering of these particles? Because for me, that's the secret sauce that you guys own.
Yeah.
Tell us about the IP estate you've surrounded on that. Can you tell us a little bit about you make it kind of like a spin coating of some electronics materials or something like that when you put this micron coating on there? How does
Yeah.
that work?
For sure. So it's really interesting. And essentially what it is that in the inside is pure drug. And so if I go, I will go back to the beginning here, so you can see this picture
You turn
of
it into a
what we're talking.
crystal, right? Isn't
Yeah,
it
and
a
so
crystal?
so the inside of the drug we take, so most drugs don't exist as crystals, they exist as powders. So
Hmm.
fluticasone is one of those, and we look at all sorts of different drugs we can do this with. And we take it, we turn it into solution so it becomes a liquid, and then you pull it out as a crystal. And how you do that, you can be creating often novel crystal shapes, sizes, and habits. That itself becomes part of your IP. Then you create and you size these crystals. So you create this really optimal volume to surface area ratio. And what that is that's kind of like a really big ice cube in a glass of whiskey as opposed to a bunch of shredded ice. That's part of what's happening here. The other part then becomes that you create this coating. And the way we create the coating, and I can't get into all the details, but essentially what happens is it's like these things are in a vortex of wind.
Right.
And while they're in there, they get coated just with a couple microns of polymer, and then they come out. And then after that, we then treat that coating to be able to get the release characteristics that we want. So when we look at the patents that we have around this, the first patent that covers these was filed in 2014 and granted really very rapidly around the world, and that's a composition of matter patent. In addition to that, we have many other patents. So there are manufacturing patents, there are manufacturing process patents, there are method of use patents. Um, so we have about five families that all come together to really create the protection for this. In addition to that, from the manufacturing side, this is very complex to manufacture in the scale up to commercial, which took us many years to figure out how to do because what we're doing is so novel. Um, we have a lot of both trade secrets that will in the future become patents and patents that are around that process. So we really now have patent coverage into the mid 2040s and the ability to continue to extend that over time.
It's my understanding this is all done inside the United States. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our manufacturing for this process is all done in the United States.
Yeah, that's a very important consideration, especially these days. The key takeaway for everyone on the call today is if you look at these three kind of amoeba particles here, the drug is the inside, and it gets smaller and smaller as it time releases, but the shell, the outside coating or shell doesn't change in size. I mean, for me, that's the most important thing about your technology because those particles, when you inject them into the region of what you're trying to treat, they stay put, right? They don't
Exactly.
migrate, they don't get in the bloodstream, they don't move around the body. And that is like I'd say the key characteristic value driver of your whole technology for me right there.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what leads. So we kind of get this dual precision. We get precision of location, and then we get precision of dose and delivery.
Right.
And those things combined, whether you're delivering into the esophagus for EOE, whether you're delivering for Barrett's esophagus, as that brilliant question was talking about, or whether you're putting this into a cancer, you're really getting that level of precision because precision matters.
Right. Well, we have a couple questions right now. I'm going to go ahead to go to Chris first. Chris, I'm going to bring your speaker on board. There you are. How you doing, Chris? Long time no see. How have you been?
I've been okay, doing well.
Great.
Um,
Go ahead.
with regard to the shrinking of the capsule, the drug part of the capsule,
Yeah.
and the capsule as a whole remaining the same size, what happens to these? I'll call them dead capsules.
Good question.
Just build up in the tissue over time.
Yeah. So, Chris, that's a really good question. So, what they are, so first off, there's very little material there. If we think about spacecraft that have these really thin shells, that's what this is like. So, there's very little material there. But you're right, when the drug is gone, it remains there in the tissue, but only for a certain period of time. So, they remain for about another 3 to 4 months after the drug is gone. And then they're designed to basically break apart. And so what happens is they break apart. What we use is something called polyvinyl alcohol. So it breaks down into alcohol and water and then just gets just swept away very, very quickly. And our body has these things called macrophages, which are responsible for doing that to these after at about the 18-month mark.
Thank you for your reply. I have somebody that might want to get into that second part of the clinical trial, by the way. And I'd like to talk to you further about this. I do have a PhD in biophysics and a little bit of pharmacology behind me. I find this to be extremely interesting.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you, Chris. And yeah, please feel free to reach out either directly or through Clay, and
I'll,
love to continue the conversation.
I'm going to include your email and phone number, if it's okay, Dr. Helliwell, on
That's
my
perfect.
follow-up email for everyone. So if you need to contact James, call me or call him directly. Either way, he's very available. As you can see, he's quite involved and interested in what he's doing here. We have a couple of quick questions. I'm going to get to those now. If you have a question, feel free to ask now, because we're kind of in the Q&A part of the presentation here. First question, are there any current agreements with any large pharma companies?
No. So we've at this point, so we also have an osteoarthritis asset, which we didn't really get into much. That's had a very successful phase 2b trial. The data from that was actually published in the Lancet, which has been really good because what it did is it demonstrated not just the efficacy, but also the safety of that product. We are looking for partnerships right now in order to run the one final trial for osteoarthritis. The reason for that is although we're fully capable of running the trial, we do not want to commercially launch the osteoarthritis product. It's a pretty heavy commercial lift with a lot of expense and expertise required. In EOE, it's a bit of a different story. We actually want to keep that and keep the United States to ourselves and commercially launch it ourselves. It's a very small specialized sales force. We already at our clinical advisory board have the key doctors that decide treatment guidelines and the rest of it. So it's a very small lift. However, from Europe, we are in discussions with quite a few counterparties. There's close to a dozen who are interested in the European rights, and then also some Asian companies that are interested in Asian rights for both products, actually. So we don't have any deals yet. And we really look to 2026 as probably being the place that we will be doing that.
And another good point to make is even though this process looks like real high science, you have a very big margin in this product, right? A typical 90 plus type of margins, envisioning what you might sell it for.
Yeah, I mean the reality is our cost of goods are very, very low. And the prices that you can charge, particularly in EOE, when your main competitor is $100,000 a year, coming in at a third of that price, it just is a win for everybody. It's great for patients, it's great for payers, and is really good for us given our margins. We're not using really expensive monoclonal antibodies.
Right. It's not personalized medicine or any kind of
Exactly.
extracting phagocytes out of someone's body and
Exactly.
multiplying them. Yeah, we do that. I have an old envelope here. I just did a back of the envelope, and 10% of the population at your $30,000 therapy price tag, that's a $3 billion a year drug in the US
Yes.
alone, right? So yeah, the numbers can get big really quick. Now here's another question. There are time release treatments on the market. What makes yours different? Like time release Tylenol and things like that, right? It's a
Yeah.
different technology, right?
Yeah, so it's very different technology. One of the things you'll notice, and it's interesting, this has been a learning process for us, and that question's really, really good. When you look at the sub 3 month mark, there's quite a few things that are available out there where things might be a once every 2 weeks injectable or once a month. There's a few every 3 month injectables. Now they tend to still have peaks and troughs,
Mhm.
so they're not as flat as what you saw we deliver. And that's the reason why they kind of get stuck. There really isn't anything. In fact, we're not aware of anything that lasts 1 year from a single injection. So there are surgical implants that you can put in and pumps, but there's nothing that's lasting 1 year. And so what we're seeing from a pharmacokinetics is entirely unique. What that means is our focus is not really on a once every 3 months injection for something because when you're in that space, there are other people with that capability. When you're talking about the 6 to 12 months, but particularly the 9 to 12, you're really in your own ballpark. You've changed the game, and as one of the key opinion leaders has said a couple of times, you're really in paradigm shifting place when you do that. And so, imagine taking chemotherapy once a year, and only having it go to the tumor and not to the rest of the body.
Wow.
And so that's really what makes us stand out from what other people are doing.
Yeah, and also with EOE, that 1 year window, that's kind of a magic number because that's the time frame that they're all going for their endoscopies, right? So it kind of just matches that perfect treatment
It does.
win calendar, if you will, right?
Yeah, because the treatment guidelines, both in the US and in Europe, say because it's a progressive disease, you need to get that endoscopy once a year. And we align with, and particularly that data we look to see coming, hopefully what everybody will see is that's what we align with.
So there's a follow-up from Michael. Don't vaccines last 1 year?
So vaccines are very, very different. So a vaccine, now there's different types of vaccines, but if you think about live attenuated vaccines or sort of dead virus, dead bacteria, what they do is they actually go into your body. And the reason you often feel terrible after you get a vaccine is that what's happening is your body is seeing the virus or bacteria, but usually just the coating because it's dead. The body mounts an immune response and then disappears. But it has created a memory of that immune response. So this might be the measles, the mumps, rubella, pertussis, whatever it is you've been vaccinated for. And then as long as that's what comes back, it recognizes it and mounts an immune response. So it's not that the vaccine is actually sticking around for that long, it's that your body's remembering. When you think about things that you need an annual vaccine, for example, so the flu is a great example. It's not that your body doesn't remember the last vaccine, it's that the flu itself has changed. So you need to show your body sort of a sample image of whatever the new flu virus is, because the flu virus, kind of like COVID, changes very, very quickly. Um, Hope that makes sense as an answer.
Sorry, I got screen stuck a little bit there.
No
Yeah,
worries.
that does make sense. One last question, I think, so far, and that is, have you had any adverse side effect, or what side effects have been reported so far?
Yeah, so really interestingly, so in our more than 300 patient osteoarthritis phase 2b trial, again, that was published in the Lancet, that's also available for people to view on our website. You'll see that part of the reason it was published was just that there were not any serious adverse events. In other words, we were not seeing even the normal side effects you would see with with a drug like fluticasone because we're giving it at such tiny levels because it's all just local. We don't need to give it to the rest of the body. In the EOE, we've had zero serious adverse events. The only adverse events that have been reported have been in about 20% of patients who've had a sore throat for about 48 hours after the procedure. Now, it happens to be, if you go for an endoscopy, about 20% of patients get a sore throat after endoscopy. So the physicians are really saying that's not related to your drug, that's just the procedure.
Yeah, that sounds likely. And when you consider that a lot of these patients, the more severe ones, they almost have to stop eating solid food.
Oh,
This
yeah.
disease
It is a,
progresses so much,
yeah.
they're like eating either liquid food or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And that's a terrible quality of life.
It's a terrible quality of life. And the stories that we hear from patients can be really quite tragic. I mean, young people who are suffering with this disease to the point that they're constantly throwing up,
Oh boy,
food gets
that's
stuck.
terrible.
And you can imagine, we've heard stories of people who go off to college and they have to quit college because they simply eating, if we think about it, eating and drinking is such a large part of our social world.
Yeah,
Imagine if you can't do that.
yeah, it really
It's
removes a
very
lot of
difficult.
the reasons why we're happy to be alive, right? Live to
Exactly.
eat or eat to live.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're kind of running up. We got another question here. I want to just go ahead and give everyone the code word today. The code word today is diffusphere. You'll find the spelling in all of this information here on the website, or we'll take pretty much any spelling. How big? Here's another question.
Yeah.
How big will a phase 3 trial have to be, and when do you anticipate it will start? I think there was a slide in that earlier. Maybe we can go back over that real quick.
Yeah. So basically, we anticipate at its sort of largest, it's around 300 patient trial. So really not very big.
No, it's not big
Um,
at all.
and we anticipate that'll start in early 27
Okay. Yeah.
and
So
then
we're
and then finish in mid 28, which then would be the submission to the FDA for approval.
right, right. For us, it's like you kind of these. these FDA clinical trial roadmaps, once you kind of prove your point, you show mechanism of action, you show improvement over standard of care. The rest is of somewhat academic to get it through the final machinations of approval. Things seem to be compressing a little bit now with
Yeah.
some of the changes to the FDA. Is any of that affecting you at all, or do you see any of that maybe improving your timeline somewhat down the road?
Yes, certainly. I mean, this is now just conjecture, but when we hear them speak about what it is they're trying to do, they're trying to get drugs that they know are safe or helpful for patients, and really sort of economically more
Right.
affordable, to
Viable.
market quicker. And if you think about all the things we've talked about today, that's exactly us. We're taking a drug that is used by millions of patients every day, so they know it's safe.
Hmm.
We're giving it for a very specific reason in a very specific tissue in a disease where they already know fluticasone works because it's used off label. And so, the barrier we have to get over, it just simply isn't as big as if we were inventing some new monoclonal antibody with an experimental thesis.
Yeah, makes total sense. So if you'd like to get additional information on Eupraxia, on the DiffuSphere technology, about the clinical trials that they're currently running now for this EOE indication, that's available on their website at www.eupraxia, that's EUPRAXIA pharma.com. And this PowerPoint, no, I need some DiffuSphere now. That's PowerPoint presentations on the website as well. We'll be sending you this feedback report. If you'd like to get some of the research reports, let me know. I can send those out to you. And is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we wrap this up, Dr. Helliwell?
No, I just really appreciate everybody's time today. Look forward to follow-up questions if people have them. Chris, looking forward to you reaching out and to chatting. And just there's a lot coming in the next few months, so it should be an exciting time. And we hope we'll be able to keep your attention through that period.
Oh, you definitely will. And we thank you for coming on today. We'll look forward to having you on again real soon. We know this
Okay.
1 year data, which everyone, that's a very, very big event for the companies coming up in the next month or two. We think that's going to be kind of a milestone, a watershed event for the company. So you definitely want to try and be involved prior to that coming out. Thank everyone for coming on today. Dr. Helliwell, great to see you as always. We'll look
Thank
forward to
you.
having you on again soon.
Of course.
Till then, be safe, be well, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye for now.